Every one of us has probably had an experience where we've been coached before. For some, this has been in a sporting situation as a child. Many of us have had excellent coaching experience, and some of us have had some unfavorable coaching experience. First, I want you to consider the ways in which a coach helps. A coach is focused more on the child's successes and on helping the child to move towards success. A coach, as indicated in your pre-reading, is there to help develop systems and strategies so that the child they are coaching can dramatically improve their lives. A coach helps when they are able to give effective feedback that leads to positive changes in behavior. A coach is there to help the child to find their own motivation and to find ways to compensate for any deficiencies by developing strategies to overcome them. One example of this I often face in coaching football players is when I coach players who are just smaller and more diminutive, and I teach the skill of tackling. Often this child might be motivated to tackle, but they recognize that a much bigger player will simply run them over and overpower them. Rather than trying to play like they are bigger than they are, we work on drilling them in the strategy to attack other players much lower on their body. We use cues like get low and legs are control. By this we mean that if you grab anybody running around their legs, they will fall. Using this strategy allows the player to get around the fact that they are smaller than some of those big, strong running backs who are running full steam at them. When small players experience success with this strategy and realize that they can bring that biggest guy down, they'll often feel really good about themselves, and they're now more motivated to try tackling this way more often. The same is true for children with deficits like those of children of ADHD and LD. We have to consider the deficits and strategies to overcome them to be an effective coach or mentor. It's also important to consider ways that a coach does not help. A coach is not a therapist. By this we mean that while the coach does try to understand, accept, and work constructively with, and foster self-esteem, and are generally supportive and encouraging, they do not have that formal, insight-oriented approach to helping a person change. Also, I would add that a coach is often not dealing with more of the serious mental health issues. A coach, while friendly, is also not a friend so much as a mentor. As a coach of many children in the past, I recognize that I come to care about all of the players that I coach. However, I also recognize that my role with them is to help them to be the best player they can be, to foster their individual growth and ability to use their talents, such as they are, to the best of their ability. While I always want the process of that to be fun, I also recognize that sometimes the path to improvement is paved with slow-moving progress, lots of repetition, and patience as they struggle with failing initial attempts at a skill. There is nothing more satisfying, though, than seeing a player who initially was struggling with a skill, who finally gets it and experiences success. The model outlined in your reading describes coaching as a partnership between you and the child, as well as a process that involves some structure. The partnership for me is about the child and yourself becoming allies, where they can see that you have their best interests at heart and that they see you as someone who can help them develop strategies which take advantage of their strengths and capabilities to move forward. Ultimately, it is important to recognize that any change that happens is really the result of what the child chooses to do. I find that that if the child is not really committed to the goal set forward, that any amount of coaching won't really help result in behavioral change. The child has to see the goal as their goal, and if they trust you to know how to get them there, they're more likely to respond positively to your efforts at coaching. So remember that coaching is a process that relies on the power of a collaboration between you and the child. A child must agree to work with you on any stated goals. Once this is achieved, a coach uses structure, routine, and goal setting to make progress towards the goal. One thing that helps coaches to get children to make progress is when the expectations are predictable and when they know that you are partly there to hold them accountable for their actions. That includes actions that meet with success, as well as actions that fall short of a stated goal. The coach recognizes that in order to make progress on complex actions, this requires working on sub-skills in a progression. In football, this involves working on progression of basic body position for a tackle, to slow motion head-on tackling, to half-speed tackling, to slow motion angle tackling, and then full speed angle tackling. The same is true in teaching time management, organization, or even social skills. Coaches that are more effective are also strength-based. That is, they try to find the strength in what they observed, and that they provide feedback on the performance that is non-judgmental and non-threatening. A coach also needs to provide cues that allows the child to consider the consequences of their actions and to make this a more likely habit. I call this kind of cueing being the child's external frontal lobes. The child with ADHD or with executive functioning deficits, such as LD children might experience, need this kind of coaching support more often than children without these deficits. Another point is that the coach is more focused on the what, the how, and the when rather than the why. Thus, avoid asking the child why questions. Children with ADHD and LD may not know why they act in certain ways. In fact, now that you are more knowledgeable about the nature of these disorders, you might help them to understand that the why they're struggling is directly related to their diagnosis and not so much their fault, and then help them to see that despite these challenges, that they can still be successful. If you discover that the child has started to internalize negative scripts or beliefs about themselves, you might want to encourage them to take on a more positive self-talk to replace these negative scripts. One thing a coach always does is that they use signals, primes, or cues for expected behavior, but also for when they move in transition from one behavior to another. In sports, this is the function of the whistle or even key phrases that a coach might use. A final thing I want you to consider when working with children is the idea that all coaching involves a progression from doing for, that is, modeling the behavior for a child, to doing with, that is, guided practice, and then to stepping back and cheering them on. So, model it, give them practice at it, and then use effective praise and encouragement to keep them doing it. I hope you have found this skill set to be a helpful introduction to working with your mentees.